surrendering himself to the authorities in Georgia, to delivering the most famous mugshot in history, to missing the first Republican primary debate and still remaining the frontrunner in the polls. Are these seemingly relentless indictments against the ex-commander-in-chief doing nothing but helping him win? Could he become the first American in history to take the White House with criminal indictments? He seems to think so. Just hours after the historic mugshot hit the public domain, Mr. Trump's store was selling T-shirts and mugs donning the iconic photograph. The Trump saga rages on and is showing no sign of simmering down anytime soon. So, what next? Well, joining me now from the United States is a man who has witnessed firsthand some of the most extraordinary political events in US history. Former Republican Congressman for Ohio, Bob McEwen. Hi, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you much. I certainly enjoyed that, just the last section that you had on the breakout, and you make some very good points, and I strongly support them.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Bob. And what about Trump? What's happening with him? I mean, it seems that they're trying to bring him down, but the more arrows and slings they fire at him, the stronger he gets.
Well, this is a very sad chapter in American history. A couple of years ago, the Democrat Party said that democracy was on the ballot. Everyone sort of quizzically looked, what were they talking about? Little did we suspect that they would literally try to take a Democratic candidate for office in a Democratic election and to lock them up so that you couldn't vote for them. And that's what they're attempting to do. And quite frankly, I think most of the American people are seeing through it. But it's been said that you cannot have self-government without self-discipline. And the people that are involved in this effort, the Democrat Party, are frightened to death of having to run against him in a free and open election. And so this piling on of these things are so demeaning to our form of government. And I am hopeful and optimistic that eventually it will be corrected and they'll be seen for who they are, those that are unwilling to go to the ballot box.
And do you feel that this shows that there's a two-tier justice system in America? We've seen the rioters, the January 6th rioters, being punished with the full force of the law, whereas Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioters are sometimes let off, sometimes even compensated for being arrested. And we've seen Biden avoiding any serious punishment for some of the same things that Donald Trump has been accused of, such as having the documents. The classified documents at his property. Do you think this really exposed that split?
It's such a terrible thing to have to confess, but I don't see how else you look at it. The left, as we've seen under Mao Zedong, called it the Great Leap Forward, and Klaus Schwab calls it the Great Reset. You can see this effort to undo the form of government that has maintained peace and stability for these last 70 years. And as they take over the cities, they have just gone to rampant not enforcing the law, allowing people to come and steal and to urinate on the sidewalks and things. And what has happened is Democrats took over. New York just 12 years ago was considered the safest large city on the planet. A beautiful restructuring, having, for the first time in my lifetime, 4 consecutive elections of Republican governors. Well, once the Democrats came in, immediately began to allow people to sleep on the subway and to rape and pillage without consequence, just as you said. Then we've seen our cities falling apart. There seems to be 2 levels. And now this effort to come after the president, which is coordinated by the Justice Department that was headed by Mr. Obama's former Attorney General. He's coordinating these things to have these at the local level, at the state level, and to have a federal. But both of them, you mentioned about the documents. The law is very clear about the presidential documents. And I am reminded of that beautiful scene in The Crown, in which the night before her coronation, Queen Elizabeth said, she asked if she could borrow the crown to test the weight on her head. And the keeper of the crown jewels looked at her and said, "Borrow it, ma'am? From whom? If it's not yours, whose is it?" And it's exactly the same way with these presidential documents. They don't belong to some bureaucrat somewhere. The law simply says that those are his. And then, of course, what they did, we're only talking about 131 pages. 131 pages, and yet you'll see on the news all these boxes and in bathrooms and storage halls and all of this stuff just to create the momentum, because they know that if he goes to the election, you saw what happened. America was, in fact, the entire world. In my lifetime, I've seen two opportunities when a person was able to geopolitically change the planet without a war. The first one, of course, was Ronald Reagan, the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yeah. And then this one, in 2016, China was on a roll. Everybody was at their mercy. And one man, Donald Trump said, this isn't good. We shouldn't have all of our chips and all of our batteries and all of our communications, all of our pharmaceuticals dependent upon one country. And when he did that, and the stock market in Beijing went down 40%, the stock market in America went up 50%. You saw this great shift of wealth. And brother, it made those people who had taken all of our retirement funds and all of our money and invested in China, they were mad as can be. And they're in the process of rebuilding China, as you just saw last week when they were meeting with the BRIC countries to move away from the peace and stability of post-World War II world into a communist-dominated leftist rank. And that's what this battle is about. And Donald Trump is the strongest vehicle to prevent them from being successful in that effort.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned China because the House Oversight Committee investigated or is still investigating the Biden family for corruption, particularly around Hunter Biden, and they've found evidence of payments from countries such as Romania, but also China. A businessman in China has paid, I think, something in the region of $1 million to a family member of Joe Biden. Which, I mean, this just seems an insane thing for the mass media to be ignoring. And do you think the focus on Trump and the circus around Trump is a distraction from that corruption and also from other issues around Hunter Biden with his illegitimate children and drug use?
I love the question because it answers itself. You're 100% correct. If you wanted to talk about any issue, if you wanted to talk about the strength of the dollar internationally, if you wanted to talk about inflation, if you wanted to talk about the border, if you wanted to talk about education, if you wanted to talk about our cities, if you wanted to talk about anything at all, that people would be in complete revulsion to this administration. Therefore, they have to wave the shiny object. And their shiny object is to do something that's never happened in America before, and that's to attempt to put a man in jail. They're doing it in order to get people to turn against him and get the left to smile and laugh about it. But one of them is a charge that he molested a woman 37 years ago. Now, the statute of limitation has long since run, but in a public building in which within a tee shot around the corner was the most beautiful hotel in the world, the Plaza, which he owned. Now, no one in their mind seducing a woman and you own the most beautiful hotel within walking distance would come in and attack a woman in a public store. So this woman is crazy. She's the head of she writes a sex column. She was on CNN and said that women fantasize about being. This woman, they took her off the shelf just so that they could make this charge against him, which eventually, of course, will go by the boards. But in the meantime, he is put in this terrible position, something that never should have been done and has never been done in our country ever before. This is third world banana republic stuff. That's what the Democrat Party is up to.
And Bob, before we go, I mean, you knew President Nixon back in the day. Does this compare in any way to Watergate, which was, in its time, a huge upheaval and political scandal?
Well, they of course, as you know, his campaign did some things, and he tried to protect them, and for that, he resigned. And resignation in America is much different than resignation in a parliamentary system. In America, when you resign, you're sort of considered that's the end of you. Whereas in a parliamentary system, you go off on the shelf to pay your dues and then come back. But this is an effort. There wasn't the attempt to put him in jail like this. And this is just beyond the pale. Beyond the pale.
Yeah, I mean,
they want him to die in jail.
It certainly seems like something that's tearing the country apart, and right at a time when President Biden should be trying to bring the country together. Anyway, Bob McEwen, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight.
Well, I'm optimistic that this is going to turn, and this will be actually very good for our future, that no one will dare try this again, and they'll pay a severe price. I'm hoping and praying for it.
Well, we'll see over the next coming months. Anyway, that's Bob McEwen, former congressman in America, giving us his insight into the Donald Trump saga.